He was once the face of Hollywood's golden age of fantasy. A pirate with coal-lined eyes, a crooked smile, and a drunken swagger that charmed the world. Johnny Depp wasn't just Captain Jack Sparrow. He was Pirates of the Caribbean, a role that turned him into one of the highest-paid actors on the planet, raking in hundreds of millions and cementing his place as a cinematic legend. But years later, the world would see a very different Johnny Depp, not on a grand film set, but inside a crowded courtroom. His hair tied back, his eyes weary, his face hardened by years of public battles. Across the aisle sat his ex-wife, Amber Heard. Their love story, once envied, had spiraled into accusations of violence, betrayal, and destruction. What followed was a media firestorm unlike anything Hollywood had ever seen, one that threatened to erase decades of success in the blink of an eye. How does a man who once conquered the box office with charm and eccentricity fall so far, so fast? How does a pirate worth millions become a symbol of scandal, mocked, abandoned, and erased from the very franchises he built? The journey of Johnny Depp is not just a story of fame and fortune. It is a tale of broken childhood wounds, reckless choices, toxic love, and the unforgiving spotlight of Hollywood. He sailed through oceans of success, only to crash against the rocks of personal tragedy. And behind the headlines, behind the courtroom drama, lies a truth far darker than most can imagine. But the truth behind it is much darker. Johnny Depp was not born into the glitter of Hollywood. His story began far from the red carpets and flashing cameras on June 9, 1963, in Owensboro, Kentucky. He was the youngest of 4 children. In a working-class family that seemed ordinary from the outside, but carried fractures that would shape him for life. His father, John Christopher Depp, was a civil engineer. His mother, Betty Sue, a waitress who held the family together with grit and sharp edges. Money was often scarce, and the family moved constantly, more than 20 times before Johnny turned 15. Each new town meant another attempt to fit in, another reminder of how unstable home really was. But the instability wasn't just financial, it was emotional. Johnny later described his childhood as turbulent, with an unpredictable mother who could be loving one moment and explosive the next. She hurled insults that cut deeper than any wound, and Johnny grew up learning how to disappear into himself, to escape into fantasy. His father, worn down by years of fighting, eventually walked out on the family when Johnny was a teenager. And that abandonment left a scar that never fully healed. At just 12 years old, Johnny found his first escape: cigarettes, alcohol, and eventually drugs. By 13, he was already spiraling, numbing the chaos at home with substances far too heavy for a boy his age. But there was another outlet: music. He picked up a guitar and found a voice, not in words, but in chords and melodies. Rock and roll became his rebellion, his salvation. In his teens, Depp formed garage bands, dreaming not of Hollywood, but of becoming a rock star. He idolized bands like the Rolling Stones, Aerosmith, and The Clash. Music was the only thing that made sense, the only thing that gave him control. But school? That was another story. He struggled, bored and restless, until finally, at the age of 16, he dropped out. His mother, surprisingly, didn't stop him. She even encouraged him to chase his dreams. Johnny packed his guitar and set out on a path most would consider reckless. He played in small clubs, scraping by, chasing the high of performance. At 20, he moved to Los Angeles with his band, The Kids, in hopes of making it big. But success didn't come. The band broke apart, the dream of stardom fading. Johnny was broke, living on the edge, wondering if he had already failed. And then came fate. Through a chance introduction, he met actor Nicolas Cage, who suggested Johnny try acting. At first, Depp laughed it off. He wasn't an actor, he insisted. But Cage saw something in him, something raw, magnetic, and unpolished, something Hollywood might love. Depp took a chance. auditioning for small roles, and in 1984, he landed his first film, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Though his part was minor, the film's success put him on the map. Suddenly, the boy who once hid from his mother's rage, who drowned his pain in alcohol and guitars, was standing at the edge of a new life. Yet beneath it all, Johnny Depp remained the same fragile boy, wounded, searching, never fully at peace. The Hollywood spotlight might have been calling, but the shadows of his childhood followed closely behind. Johnny Depp never set out to be a movie star. Acting was supposed to be temporary, a way to pay the bills after his music career crumbled. But fate has a strange way of leading us to the places we least expect. In 1987, Johnny landed the role that would change everything: Officer Tom Hansen in the television series 21 Jump Street. Overnight, he went from a struggling musician to a teen heartthrob plastered across bedroom walls. With his chiseled cheekbones and brooding eyes, Depp became a symbol of the late 80s, idolized by millions of teenage fans. But to Johnny, this fame felt hollow. He hated being typecast as just another pretty face. Behind the scenes, he was restless, searching for something deeper. He didn't want to be a celebrity, he wanted to be an artist. And so, at the height of his television success, he made a bold decision. He walked away. Hollywood thought he was crazy, but Johnny was determined to follow his instincts, even if it meant risking everything. That risk paid off. In 1990, he starred in Edward Scissorhands, directed by Tim Burton. The film was a gothic fairy tale, and Depp's haunting, delicate performance turned him into more than just a star. It made him an actor. Audiences saw past the heartthrob and glimpsed the vulnerability that had been hiding beneath his cool exterior all along. It was the beginning of a lifelong partnership with Burton, who became both a mentor and a creative soulmate. Together, they created some of cinema's most eccentric characters: Ichabod Crane in Sleepy Hollow, Willy Wonka in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and of course, the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland. Through the 1990s and early 2000s, Johnny built a reputation as Hollywood's rebel. He avoided blockbuster franchises, preferring independent films and risky projects like Benny and June, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and Donnie Brasco. Each role showed another layer of his range, earning him critical acclaim. He became the actor who refused to play by the rules, mysterious, unpredictable, and endlessly fascinating. But then came the role that would forever define him: Captain Jack Sparrow. In 2003, Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl was released, and with it, Depp unveiled a character so bizarre, so magnetic, that it shocked Disney executives. They feared audiences wouldn't understand his drunken swagger, slurred speech, and flamboyant mannerisms, but audiences adored it. Captain Jack became an instant icon, and Johnny Depp became one of the most bankable stars in the world. With Pirates raking in billions, Depp's career reached its peak. It commanded salaries of $20 million per film, topping Forbes' lists of highest-paid actors. He was nominated for Oscars, showered with accolades, and adored by fans worldwide. But fame, as always, came with a price. While Johnny was celebrated for his artistry, whispers followed him of chaotic sets, heavy drinking, and reckless spending. He purchased islands, collected expensive art, and lived a lifestyle that bled millions. Hollywood still saw him as a genius, but cracks were beginning to form. And then came Amber Heard. Their paths crossed in 2009 on the set of The Rum Diary. She was young, beautiful, and ambitious. He was older, vulnerable, and searching for stability after years of tumultuous relationships. At first, their romance seemed like a Hollywood fairy tale, but in reality, it was the beginning of the storm that would later consume everything he had built. Johnny Depp had climbed from troubled childhood to global superstardom. He had it all: wealth, awards, fame, and a legacy secured by an immortal pirate. But beneath the gold and glitter, the darkness was never far away, waiting for its chance to return. By the early 2010s, Johnny Depp stood as one of the last true movie stars. He was untouchable, commanding colossal paychecks, adored by audiences, and celebrated for his daring artistry. Yet behind the curtain, the storm was gathering. In 2012, Depp's long-term relationship with French singer Vanessa Paradis, his partner of 14 years and the mother of his 2 children, came to an end. To the world, Johnny appeared composed, but in reality, the breakup left him unmoored. He sought comfort in a new romance with Amber Heard, a rising actress he had met on the set of The Rum Diary. She was glamorous, fiery, and 2 decades younger. For Johnny, Amber seemed to represent a new beginning. For Amber, Johnny was the gateway into Hollywood royal. Their whirlwind love affair quickly turned into marriage in 2015, and at first, the public celebrated them as a golden couple. But behind closed doors, the relationship was volatile, filled with arguments, jealousy, and accusations. The marriage became a battlefield, with each side claiming the other was the aggressor. In 2016, Amber Heard filed for divorce and accused Johnny Depp of domestic abuse. Headlines exploded. Photos of her bruised face spread across tabloids worldwide. Depp, once a beloved hero, was suddenly recast as a villain. In the era of Me Too, Hollywood wasted no time distancing itself from him. Disney quietly dropped him from Pirates of the Caribbean 6. Warner Brothers forced him out of Fantastic Beasts. Projects evaporated overnight, and his reputation crumbled. For Johnny, it was more than just a career setback. It was public humiliation on a global scale. He insisted he was innocent, that he had been the one abused. But the media had already made up its mind. Articles painted him as violent, unhinged, and self-destructive. Former friends and business partners came forward with stories of his drug use, drinking binges, and reckless spending. Court documents revealed he had squandered hundreds of millions, buying islands, luxury estates, and even firing ashes of a friend out of a cannon. The world that once crowned him king now treated him like a cautionary tale. In 2018, The Washington Post published an op-ed by Amber Heard, where she described herself as a survivor of domestic abuse. Though she never named Johnny, the implication was clear. Hollywood closed its doors for good. To many, Depp was finished, a disgraced actor drowning in lawsuits, debt, and scandal. A man who once filled theaters was now filling courtrooms, locked in bitter legal battles against his ex-wife, his former lawyers, even his own management team. He became a ghost in Hollywood, his name whispered only in scandal, his face plastered across tabloids instead of movie posters. The darker side of Johnny Depp, the substance abuse, the late-night rages, the destructive tendencies, was now public record. The pirate had lost his ship, his fortune, his reputation. And for the first time in his career, it seemed he had lost the audience too. Johnny Depp was no longer Captain Jack Sparrow. He was a fallen star, mocked by the industry he once ruled. But the story was not over. What began as a downfall would soon transform into one of the most shocking comebacks in Hollywood history. By 2022, the world was no longer watching Johnny Depp on the silver screen. Instead, they were watching him in real time, live-streamed into millions of homes as the trial of the century unfolded. Depp had sued Amber Heard for defamation over her Washington Post op-ed, demanding $50 million in damages. Heard countersued for $100 million. What followed was not just a court case, it was a global spectacle. Every testimony, every tear, every shocking detail was dissected across social media, turning the courtroom into a stage and the trial into a twisted form of entertainment. For 6 grueling weeks in Fairfax, Virginia, the public was given front-row seats to the disintegration of a marriage. Graphic text messages, recordings of fights, stories of drugs, alcohol, and violence, all laid bare. Depp spoke of humiliation, of losing his career, of his children forced to endure the whispers and headlines. He insisted he had never struck a woman. He painted himself as the true victim of abuse. Amber Heard told a different story, one of terror, control, and emotional destruction. Her testimony was harrowing, but the tide of public opinion had already shifted. On TikTok, on Twitter, millions of voices mocked her, dissected her expressions, and turned her sobs into memes. For the first time in years, Johnny Depp was no longer the villain. He was the underdog, the man fighting to reclaim his name.